people are pretty familiar with what they are, but there are still some that don't know. I'll give you a little background. Before I started at KnowBe4, 4 years ago, I started here. I worked for a nursing college. I was actually in charge of a nursing school, and I was very unfamiliar with phishing emails. I actually just assumed if it was spam, it was spam, but I never really thought about, okay, if something gets through the filters into my work email, and if it looks legitimate, it must be real. I always thought it must be real. No one ever educated me on it. So when I moved to KnowBe4, it was very eye-opening because I realized phishing emails are very common and they look real. They look very real nowadays, which is exactly what we're talking about here. A phishing email is something that appears to look like it comes from a reputable company, someone that you know, in order to reveal personal information such as passwords, credit card information, your social security numbers, any additional data they could use against you. And that is what we're talking about more so than anything. With the coronavirus right now and everything that's going on, I would imagine that most people are working remote just as we are, which is why we have a little bit of the growing pains with some of the applications. But because of that, there's a lot of heightened sensitivity around the coronavirus, updates, anything to do with online shopping, deliveries, you name it. And the bad guys, the hackers, are really capitalizing on this right now. Basically the employees are low-hanging fruit because most of them are running around like rogue rangers and they don't have anyone to truly say, hey, think before you click on that, right? Like, are you sure you want to do this? And unfortunately, the phishing success is on the rise. Malicious emails are happening. I think it increased. They just did some statistical data on it, over 150% increase in the past month alone, just because of the unfortunate situation we're all in right now. Next. So our program, in a nutshell, I'll talk to you about it. Basically, what we do at KnowBe4 is we do simulated phishing and training that coincides with the phishing. We look to do a baseline phishing test to see what is your current landscape, where do you fall right now before you do any additional training, and then what your success rates would look like throughout the years. So if you take a look at this is our actual data based on over 6 million users within the past year. You'll see the average company starts out about 27% when they do their baseline. Within 3 months, it almost cuts to half. And after 1 year, the goal is to get it down as low as possible to around 2%. So the point is, it does take continuous training. 1 time a year is not enough. You definitely want to stay top of mind and do frequent training, but not too much training at one time. So there's definitely a balance with that. Next. Next. So interestingly enough, we consider people as the critical layer between the fabric of security programs, because you can have your antivirus in place, you can have all your external hardware in place to prevent, social engineering from happening, phishing emails, malicious attacks from happening. But at the end of the day, 10 to 15% of those malicious emails still get through. Why? Well, that's because the antivirus, the software companies only can update the systems, only can update, software so frequently. While they're working on those updates, the bad guys are behind the scenes penetrating the system. So eventually something will get through. But we can strengthen that by educating the employees. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Next. So the human layer is the 8th layer in security. You've got your physical layer, your data link, network, transportation, presentations, and applications. But at the end of the day, your last line of defense is that security awareness layer, the human firewall. It's getting that training in front of the everyday staff, not just the technical employees, but anyone and everyone that has any access to emails, phone calls, anything that has to do with social media, whether it's on their mobile devices or on a laptop, a computer, it does not matter. Training needs to be done. Next. So this was a report that we did. It was a couple years ago, but back then it was 250%. Microsoft was actually doing the analysis on this with the phishing increases. Again, as we spoke about with the coronavirus, it's on the rise even more so. So this is one of those things that unfortunately it's not going away. and it's only getting worse, but we can prevent these things from happening if we get the proper training in place. Next. Why do people click on phishing links? And why is it so quickly? Well, the interesting fact is most of us are trained to respond quickly. It's our job, really. It's our job to communicate effectively and fast. So if our CEO, our boss, our director, our VP, a nice large client that's requesting something from us or a paid invoice, we're going to respond quickly because that's our job. So it's actually human nature to do so, which is what makes us fall victim to, which is quite amazing. The human element, the behavior behind everything, the psychology. So that's actually why. So historically speaking, the average employee will click on a phishing email within the first hour if it's going to happen. It's very, very fast. Next. So we do some studies in our platform, which I'd love to give you guys access to the entire platform right now so you could see some of this, but we actually do a lot of research around what's the top phishing emails, what's the top email subjects, what type of emails do people click on the most, and based on that, this is actually where this data came from. You'll see a lot of it has to do with social networking, LinkedIn and Facebook, anything to do with that, anything to do with mail delivery, Amazon, UPS, FedEx is a very, very common one, and even more so right now. Instacart, what's the other one that they use right now for Shipped? Instacart, those ones that are doing the grocery deliveries. Big issues right now. Walmart grocery deliveries, there's all sorts of them that they're using, and people are falling victim to it right now. Of course, your change of passwords is another big one. And then there's some smaller subcategories that they can use to essentially blackmail someone, saying that they tagged certain photos of someone. They even have an area that's of focus, which is quite crazy, but it's something people don't talk about as much. But sextortion is a real thing. Yes, I said sextortion. Unfortunately, guess what's been increasing with phishing? People spending time in their personal time online, if you know what I mean. And they're using that against them to phish them, to get ransomware, to get additional data and blackmail these employees. So that's something to think about. It's quite crazy, but they use everything. Next. So the cost of clicking, it's not just money. There's quite a bit that comes into tail with the cost of clicking on a malicious email. Loss of data, intellectual property. You might not be able to get that information back. Reputation. A lot of us have large clienteles. We have a lot of significant importance wrapped around that we want to make sure that we stay strong in the trust that we have with our clients. Yes, there's cost that comes with this too. In healthcare, $355 per record is stolen, and average record's about $158. And typical price for a data breach for a large business is around $800,000 to $900,000. And then for a small to medium business, it's around $80,000 to $100,000. So in the grand scheme of things, it can be quite a bit. But where it really hurts and impacts a lot of the companies is the man hours spent to recover and recoup. Recently there was, where was it? It was one of the cities that it happened to where they were down for several days. And the amount of money that was lost in that time to recover is insane. The man hours alone, working the weekends, the holidays, trying to get this up and running so that business can be as usual. It's just, you can't even put a dollar on that, like time is very precious. So there's a lot to come and play with this. Next. So random fact, 91% of data breaches start with one single spear phishing email, one single targeted email. 91% of those data breaches. CEO fraud is huge. And the reason for this is because the CEOs have a lot more access to sensitive data, to specific pieces of information, and they use it to spoof significant employees within the organization. Imagine your CEO sends you, and you're in finance, for instance, an email asking for you to pay a specific invoice today because it's past due and you need this done now. That's how easy it is to happen. W-2 scams. We're still in the tax season. It's very, very common. H&R Block, any of the things that you would do online to do your W-2s is huge. Or spoofing your HR department about your W-2s. So maybe someone sends a malicious email that looks like it's coming internally from HR that has to do with your W-2s. And the cost is crazy. And for 2021, they're looking at over $20 billion, and that was before the coronavirus. So I'm sure there's going to be some more analytics around that. But the takeaway here is we can actually prevent all of this in a very easy way. We can definitely do something to get in front of it rather than be reactive. We can be proactive to all of this. Next. So we were talking about CEO fraud and how it is one of the biggest issues when it comes to phishing emails. And this kind of paints the picture for everyone. Where it starts from, they pick a good email, someone responds to it, and then the damage is done. Now, the damage can be all sorts of things, from money that's gone forever, the CEO loses their job, or the CFO or whomever did the actual transaction. Lawsuits happen from your vendors, your clients, your customers, and they even happen internally from employees. So there's a lot of other things that can happen with this. And then, of course, we talked about intangibles, right? That reputation, that loss of trust. But again, it's very simple to prevent a lot of this if we're just proactive and we do some initial training that stays in front of these things. Next. So how do you get a program that works? Well, first off, a lot of security programs are too superficial and they only do them for compliance purposes. So they're very, check the box, boring, blasé. They don't have enough substance to really grab the attention of the employee. Kind of like sexual harassment when you first start at a company and you have to do it once a year, right? Everyone does it, but we're just kind of going with it. We're not actually like, oh, I actually learned something new today. It's like, okay, for dry red eyes, I'll do this, but I really don't care to do it. You just have to make sure it's engaging for whoever your culture, that targeted person or group. Make sure it's fun, engaging, short, enticing, and relevant to whomever you're training. Next. So this gives you a better picture of what we do at KnowBe4 and how you can manage that social engineering problem. So like I mentioned before, you start with a baseline test to see what would be your initial phish-prone percentage. Then you train those employees on the basics of security awareness training. Mind you, we have 3 different versions of your initial security awareness training. We have a 45-minute version, a 15-minute version, and a 5-minute version, depending on who you're training. And then from there, after you've trained, you're going to do some random phishing emails to see, did they absorb the information that was given? This is the only way you can tell that if they truly understood the training that was applied. Yes, in the training there will be interactions throughout the modules and they have to answer questions and so forth, but there's no better way than doing a random phishing email sometime down the road to see, did they apply what we taught them? And then you just track those results as you go. We do recommend doing training at least once a quarter and doing at least 1 phishing email per month. So what's 1 email a month, right? It's not much at all to do this. And then I think it's just my contact information.